The world of business is constantly evolving, and Comcast Business keeps you totally in step with secure, AI-backed networking in more than 100 countries. They're powering over 90% of the Fortune 500 and millions of small businesses. That's a lot of muscle. And behind it all, thousands of experts answering your call at 2 a.m. like it's 2 p.m. One partner, powering how business gets done for companies around the globe. When you add it all up, no one does business like Comcast Business.
You've never been one to settle. Stand down or stand still. You're a lifelong learner, energized by excellence. There's a fire inside you you can't ignore. You've got competition to outrun, momentum to build on, and your own high standards to meet. Stop now? Not a chance. At Capella University, we help you catch what you're chasing because you've always had the drive. Now, go earn the degree. Capella University. What can't you do? Visit capella.edu to learn more.
I'm pretty confident talking into a mic. Hey, I'm doing it right now. But home projects? I second guess everything. Is that noise normal? Is that water damage? Who do I even call? That's where Thumbtack comes in. Just upload a photo or voice note, and it uses AI-powered search to match you with the right top-rated local pro. So instead of guessing, you get clarity and can hire with confidence. For your next home project, try Thumbtack. Hire the right pro today.
Hey, everybody, before we start this episode, I do need to let you know that for like the first 10 minutes of this particular episode, I just gave everybody an update of what's going on the show, what's going on in my life, all that stuff. So if that's not something you want to listen to, that's totally cool. Skip ahead about 10 minutes and 30 seconds, and we'll get right to the news. So just FYI, 10 minutes and 30 seconds, skip ahead, and you won't have to listen to all my nonsense. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and start the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Kilowatt, a podcast about electric vehicles, renewable energy, autonomous driving, and much, much more. My name is Bodie, and I am your host, and I almost forgot what my own podcast was about. So, it's been a day. Not necessarily a bad day. Lots of stuff going on. First off, we have a new Patreon supporter, and that is Francis. Francis, thank you so much for going to supportkilowatt.com. In this case, Francis chose to support on Patreon over the other things, Supercast, and I appreciate it. Thank you for doing that, Francis. As many of you know, all of the money goes back into the show. None of the money goes to my pocket that comes from the Patreon. So very, very helpful. So thank you very much for doing that. Also, Jerbo, looks like Jerbo increased his pledge, which Jerbo supports the show in several different ways financially. So I really appreciate it. But, you know, I only need one, Jerbo, but I do appreciate you as always. And I did send you an email asking some questions. If you want to answer that, you're more than welcome to, of course. And then I stumbled on a service called Rephonic, and what Rephonic does is it aggregates like reviews for podcasts. So, I don't always go and look. I can see, but I don't always go and look and see what everybody has said when they review the show on Apple or Spotify or whatever. It's just there's a lot of different steps to go to that, to do all of the different services that you can review on. And there's a service called Rephonic that actually aggregates the reviews so you can see them. So I was actually very pleasantly surprised to see that there are several reviews across multiple sites out there. So thank you to everybody who goes out and leaves a review on the show. It really does help. And if you haven't done so yet and you want to, please go leave an honest review. Even if it's negative, go leave an honest review. I would really appreciate that. All right. It's kind of back and forth whether I wanted to talk about this last thing. My mom and aunt aren't in the best of health, and depending on how their weeks go, kind of depends on how my week goes in terms of mental health. in terms of mental health, I guess. So my aunt is struggling at the moment, and she seems to be getting better. But just to kind of give you a little background, my aunt is only 5 years older than me. My mom's only 18 years older than me. So it's not like they are old. My mom's still in her late 60s. My aunt is in her mid 50s. And, it's just kind of a bummer because when we grew up, to me, she was more like an older sister than an aunt, or even a friend than an aunt. And while we didn't stay particularly close through adulthood because, Facebook didn't really exist and it was expensive for long distance calls. She's always somebody that I've always looked up to and admired and loved. So anyway, when the show misses, it's usually because I'm just not in the headspace to want to be able to record. And I don't know. I thought it would be a good I was going back and forth whether or not I wanted to talk about it, and I don't really want to go into great details on it, but it's just, if I miss a show, it's usually because I'm busy or one of those two things has happened. I get some bad news about my mom or my aunt or whatever, and it's just very hard to muster up the energy to want to record or do anything for that matter. But I still, throughout the week, I'm constantly working on the show and trying to make it better. And, we did that little experiment a week ago where I did, a Tesla show and an EV, general EV news show. That seems to be fairly well received. So this week I have a lot of EV news. I don't have any Tesla news. So the next episode will be probably more of a Tesla heavy show, if not completely Tesla, and leave the EV news out. There's just so much to talk about right now. On July 4th, I crossed over to having less than a year left before I can retire. So, in that time, I'm going to be retooling the show to try to make it to be profitable. I would like to be able to not have to have a job that's outside of my side job and this. Like, I want this to be my main focus, this show and Beyond the Post, and the Shuffle Playlist podcast, which we've started working on again as well. In order to do that, I got to find a way to kind of retool the show that makes it, one, interesting for people to want to actually listen and interact with, and two, something that I can do like long term. So yeah, I mean, like right now, if you look at my work weeks, my official work weeks you don't even include podcasts in the work week, but my official work weeks are typically between, we'll say 65 and 80 hours a week, which most of that is done at a fire station, and I can sleep some of that time. So it's not like I'm somebody who really works 80 hours a week. That's a huge difference from what I'm doing. I'm technically getting paid for over 80 hours a week, but I'm not always working for 8 hours a week. I can watch TV at the fire station or just sit and stare at the wall if I need to. It's like people who genuinely work 80 hours a week, they're working way harder than I am. But yeah, I'm trying to find out in the next year, because I'll probably retire of September of 2027, kind of how best to tool the show so that it actually starts making more money. The show does pretty good. It's not going to replace my current salary for sure, but it is okay. I need it to do much better if I'm just going to do this full time. So with that, I am trying to figure out different ways to make the show more lucrative, I guess, financially sound is probably a better way to put it. So just so you know, these are all things that I've been thinking about over the last, 2 or 3 months. Sorry for the big dump. I didn't. This wasn't supposed to be how this went. So anyway, so everybody's kind of peeked behind the curtain. That's where we're at. I do have some ideas of where to go. If you have suggestions, I would encourage you to email me, Bodie, BODIE @918digital.com. If you think you know of a better way, or if you have a suggestion on how to kind of tool the show to to get more listeners. Really what it is the folks that we have are pretty diehard, and I love that. And I certainly want to continue that. I mean, we have enough people where it's very hard for me to keep up with like emails and stuff like that, or YouTube comments. I owe a couple of people some YouTube comments. So that's great. And I'm getting to be on more shows. So I'm going to go on the Consumer Guide podcast, or Car Stuff podcast, which is by Consumer Guide. I'm going to be on that next week, July 13th. And, so that's cool. Tom and Jill are awesome, and I'm excited to be able to get a chance to sit down. And Jill's not going to be on that day, but Tom's going to be on. Get a chance to sit down and chat with them, and introduce the show to more people. So there's lots of things that we're trying here. When I say we, I mean the global we, me, and whoever else wants to chime in, to kind of grow the show. That's really what needs to happen, is the show needs to appeal to more people or be presented to more people so the show grows. And and we have some things with the DTNS folks planned, and Tom and their team has always been super supportive. So, one specific thing, I'm going to be on a show called Live With It. And if you don't know what Live With It is, it's like a review show where people like actually live with a product for a little bit, and then they give their take on it. So I would highly encourage you to subscribe to that show. I've learned a couple of different things, especially about podcasting stuff that's been out there through Live With It. That's been the most helpful for me, but they do everything from, robot vacuums to the Amazon robot and lots of other cool stuff. So go subscribe to Live With It. Go subscribe to the Car Stuff podcast so you'll hear me when it comes out. Okay, that was 10 minutes of just me. Let's talk about actual show stuff here. Man, I should probably put at the beginning of this episode, you should skip ahead 10 minutes if you don't want to hear my nonsense. I'm going to do that right now. Hold on 1 second. Okay, gave the little disclaimer up front, so now we can start the show, and I'm going to leave all this in an effort to be transparent. Okay, let's start off with our EV news. Like I said, no Tesla news for this episode. Next episode will be more Tesla heavy. Silvio Napoli, totally butchering that name, is the new CEO of Lucid Motors. Officially took over on June 1st. And he has been making a number of changes. Most notably, Lucid is laying off 1,500 employees at the factory in Casa Grande, Arizona, AMP1. That's about 18% of their employees. There is AMP2, which is in Saudi Arabia, and we'll talk about that here in a second. It doesn't sound like they're laying off anybody from Saudi Arabia. It's just it's like a second shift at the Casa Grande plant here in Arizona. And interim CEO Mark Winterhoff, who was the chief operating officer, he was supposed to, once they got a new CEO, Mark was supposed to go back to being the chief operating officer, and they have now eliminated that position altogether. So I don't know if Mark is staying with the company or if he is moving on. I would imagine he is moving on, and he'll probably be CEO of some other company, if I had to guess. And it'll probably be an EV company. Now, as far as how Lucid did in Q2 2026, they posted a net loss of around $1 billion. In terms of production, they produced 5,500 cars. They delivered 3,093 cars. Initially, Lucid projected that they were going to deliver 28,000-ish cars for 2026, and that number is being revised, and I would imagine that number is being revised down, not up. On top of that, when we're looking at bad luck for Lucid, they had to recall 4,500 Gravity SUVs, and that's pretty much all of them, if not all of them. This is all to say that Lucid is struggling. My general feelings about Lucid has been, for a very long time, that as long as Saudi Arabia is willing to pay, Lucid will be okay. And I don't see any signs of Lucid, that agreement. I don't see any cracks, right? I think they're still going to be willing to float Lucid while they get things figured out. But, we're getting to a point where if Lucid doesn't actually start, making a profit or at least coming close to breaking even, I could totally see a world where they're just completely owned by the Saudis and, they'll do whatever they want with the name after that. But, yeah, not great for Lucid, but they do have some things that are positives. As a general rule, Lucid is pretty well reviewed. And in a fun, interesting twist, the Lucid Gravity was named the 2026 luxury car of the year, which is great, except for it was in Saudi Arabia, which is probably true. That's still probably the world luxury car of the year in Saudi Arabia, but also Saudi Arabia has a decent interest in promoting that car in their country, especially with AMP2, their new factory in Saudi Arabia. So I just thought that was funny. Now, on the other side of things, because they are going through it at the moment, like I said, there are some positives. Their sub $50,000 mid-sized EV called the Cosmos, which is going to look like a shrunken down Lucid Gravity, according to drawings. This is going to be a super important vehicle for Lucid, and I think if they can, take the what makes the Air and the Gravity great without, some of the issues, because some people have had to lemon law their cars. If they can take that Cosmos and they can take what makes the Air and the Gravity great and put that in the Cosmos, I think they're going to have a really compelling car, because I think the Lucid Gravity looks great. It's a little too much for me, but a $50,000 Lucid Cosmos sounds like it would be, a contender. My next EV, I would like it to be a pickup truck, but I have 7 more years before I buy a car, so Lucid had some time to figure this out. But before, for my purchasing decision, but I think this is going to be a pretty compelling car. Now, initially, it sounds like production of the Cosmos will begin initially at their AMP2 plant in Saudi Arabia, and somewhere between 6 to 12 months later, we'll start to see that here in the U.S. So, not a U.S. first product, but, Saudi Arabia is a kingdom, and they can, they could subsidize this car initially by the government buying it and giving it to government employees to drive around for different things. Like, I don't think that somebody needs to be driving around in a $260,000 Lucid Sapphire checking water meters, for instance. They could probably do that in a Gravity and still be good. Now, in other good news for Lucid has that partnership with Uber for the robotaxi deal. And that would mean 35,000 vehicles sold to Uber if everything goes right. And those vehicles would be a mix between the Lucid Gravities and the Cosmos. So if everything goes right, that's a decent amount of cars, especially for Lucid, a company that recently delivered 3,000 cars in Q2 2026. That's good news for them. That's a big partnership, and hopefully they're able to maintain that partnership with Uber. And another little bit of good news is Uber and Lucid and Nuro, which is the third member of that partnership, they secured a permit for Gravity robotaxi operations in San Francisco or in California. I don't know if it was specifically for San Francisco, but a lot needs to happen before their fortunes turn. Right. But I think they have good engineers. One could argue that Peter Rawlinson had maybe the focus Peter Rawlinson put on the company and the way that the direction the company was going maybe wasn't the best. Although he is the chairman of the board, or the board chair. I don't know. I don't want Lucid to go away. So we'll keep an eye on it, but there's your update. Now, we're going to go from a very expensive car company to a very affordable car company. Slate Auto says that it has no plans to sell its pickup in Canada. They didn't go into any detail as to why, but if I had two guesses, I would say the first reason would be tariffs. Canada currently has a 25% reciprocal tariff on all vehicles that are imported from the U.S., so that would bump the price of the Slate up from $25,000 base price to around $31,000 US, which is about 44,000 Canadian. And for that price point, you could get a Ford Maverick or a Ranger or a Chevy Colorado. All of those vehicles are in that price point. They are ICE trucks or ICE vehicles, except for the Maverick has a hybrid version, but they're all ICE vehicles. But they're also vehicles that have, for that price point, automatic windows, a radio, that kind of thing. The kind of things you expect to have in a car. So the novelty of the Slate and it being so much more affordable with that 25% tariff isn't necessarily, it's not enough to pay the same price that you would for a Maverick, for instance, and not get automatic windows, the creature comforts that we're all used to. Now, my second guess, outside of tariffs, is at the moment, Slate is about to start production. And while they're starting production, on the surface, this truck doesn't have a lot to it, so it should be easy to produce. However, there are a ton of different things that can go wrong during your initial production run. You can have supplier issues, you can have manufacturing issues, you can have different battery issues. There's just so much that could happen. So my guess is that they're going to get through the U.S. reservations, and then they'll open it up to other North American countries after that. It does not mean that it will never be in Canada. At some point in time, we have a new... we're supposed to have a new trade agreement with Mexico and Canada done. And whether it's like we're just going to put a rubber stamp on the current trade agreement or we're going to completely renegotiate it, I have no idea what's going to happen there. But once that changes, if it changes, there might be a road for the Slate to go to Canada for sure, sooner than maybe what Slate is. They haven't really indicated anything, but sooner than when you think. But it really kind of depends on that trade agreement that's expiring. And, as far as we know at the moment, at best, it would, well, I shouldn't say at best. There's a good likelihood that it'll just stay as it is, the trade agreement. And then there's a likelihood that it would get better or it could get worse. We'll kind of see. And by the way, that's not just for Slate. Automakers like to know things ahead of time, and I would guess that other North American automakers are waiting to make changes based on that agreement as well. And the folks at the Car Stuff podcast, Jill and Tom, did a great job discussing this on their latest episode, which was out on the 6th of July. So I would go listen to that if you want more information on that. Okie doke. So next up, we have the 2027 Subaru Trailseeker EV. It starts at a very impressive $40,000. This car is a little bit smaller than a Model Y. It's got, 30 cubic feet of cargo space in the rear versus the Model Y having a 31.3 cubic feet cargo space, but they're comparable in size. The Trailseeker does have Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, 375 horsepower, 0 to 16, 4.3 seconds. That's faster than my Model Y. It's coming with an X port, or it has an X port, 150 kilowatts of charge. That's a little slow. 74.7 kilowatt hour battery, which gets you 281 miles of range. They can definitely start improving on some efficiencies with this car because, the Model Y has a roughly the same size battery and has 320 miles of range. So there's some improvements that could happen on Subaru's side. 3,500 pounds of towing. This car is reviewing very well. So I if you're looking for an EV, I would highly suggest taking a peek. It may not be for you, but at least it deserves a look. And then on top of that, the 2027 Subaru Uncharted will start at $35,000. So if you're looking for something that's even more affordable, take a look at the Uncharted. I like the look of the Uncharted much better than I actually like the look of the Trailseeker. For me, the Uncharted looks more like what a Subaru is supposed to look like. And I understand that over time, the design sense is supposed to change. What a Subaru looked like when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s isn't what it should look like in 2026. So I get that. But to me, I like the look of the Uncharted better than the Trailseeker. But the interior of the Uncharted and Trailseeker are an absolute no for me. It feels like a Toyota on the inside, or it looks like a Toyota on the inside, and I just don't like the way the interior of a Toyota. Toyota's not coming on this podcast, so I'm going to stop sucking up to them. I'm just not a fan of Toyota's interiors. But yeah, if you are though, if you like that cockpit feeling of kind of being what I would describe as in a fighter jet, you this might be something you enjoy. All right. Let's see. We have a couple of community submissions. First up, Jamie from Ireland. He sent along a Guardian article, and European car makers are moving from larger electric SUVs to smaller, more affordable EVs, which, especially in Europe, makes a lot of sense. And there's a few different reasons for this move. First of all, initially when EVs came out, it was very expensive to produce because of the battery. And in order for them to make money or lose less money, they had to build in what would be considered in Europe a larger EV. In North America, it might be considered a medium to medium smaller EV in North America. But, they now, because of advances in battery tech, we have increased energy density with a decreased price. There's less parts on an EV. So there's more opportunities for margin at those smaller compact EVs. You might buy a car for 18 or 22,000 euros that might have 180 or 200 miles of range. I'm sorry, in my head, maybe 300 kilometers of range. I'm trying to do the conversion, and I'm probably wrong there. But that's still, like, depending on what you're using the car for, that might be plenty for a lot of people, and it's super affordable. So, it just makes more sense. And then just in general, I've been to Europe a few times, and a larger SUV in Europe makes, in a lot of cases, no sense, right? I tell these stories all the time, so if you've heard them, I haven't told them for a while, so if you've heard them, just tune out for the next few seconds. But when my wife and I, like in 2008, we were in Italy, and we were in a CC, we were looking for a place to park. You're not allowed to, as a non-local, drive around that castle town, right? And what I read, or what I thought was an area that would show more parking, that was not the case. I think it was telling us that we needed to park where we intended on parking initially. But I ended up getting into the town of Assisi and driving around in this teeny tiny car. There were parts where people would actually have to get up on what wasn't really a sidewalk. It was more like little blocks, and they were just kind of getting out of the way. It was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. But I pride myself now on being that stupid American that wasn't able to read the signs and drove through, like in a comedy, a castle town in Europe. But it was also a cool experience. So I'm glad that I got to do it. I'm glad that I did not get a ticket. And I will never do it again. I will know better now, but learned my lesson. And then in Siena, the same trip, and we were in the same car. The parking to get into one of the sites, and I can't remember which one it was so tight that my wife had to get out first, and I parked, and then I had to crawl through the car and exit out the back hatch. And it wasn't like This was not a situation where I was being rude by blocking people in. That's how all the parking was so narrow. I don't have any idea how anybody else was able to get in and out of their cars except for going through the hatch. Like, there was that little room. So having a bigger car in those situations doesn't make much sense. Now, there's plenty of opportunities for, long road trips and stuff where a bigger car would be fine in those places in Europe. But then there's those other cases that are not uncommon where you have smaller roads and smaller parking and stuff like that. Okay. Anyway, so that's that. Back to, the European automakers making smaller cars. Another thing that's kind of putting pressure on them is the Chinese automakers. Chinese automakers, as you know, are making a pretty big push into the EU, and the goal for them is to expand outside of China, right? And they're bringing these really affordable cars with compelling tech into the European market, which is in turn putting pressure on the European automakers to make more affordable vehicles. If you want to sell, like if you're selling a car for $35,000 and they can pay $22,000 for a car that's mostly comparable, maybe a little smaller, maybe a little less range, but by and large comparable, it's going to be hard to convince people to spend an extra 12 or 13,000 euros. Use the proper currency. It's going to be hard for them to spend that extra money when this car is pretty good right now. So, and there's lots of different reasons why you would buy the car from a European automaker over a Chinese automaker, and some of that could be, local pride in manufacturing, or maybe you work for the company or whatever. There's lots of different reasons why, but I think for most people, they're shopping on price and what value for money. And Chinese, it's hard to argue that the Chinese are giving you a good price and value for money. Now, with all of that, we've kind of alluded to this a little bit. There are some trade-offs, and you have to be okay with a smaller car with a smaller battery, which gives you shorter range. So it's up to whoever's buying it to decide whether that trade-off is worth it or not.
Pros, save more on what you need to get the job done right. Right now at Lowe's. Get 15% off select custom entry and interior doors. Plus, save $80 on the DeWalt 20-volt Max 2-tool combo kit. Now just $169. And at the Lowe's Pro Desk, bring us your materials list and get a quote in minutes. Handwritten, a photo, or even a sticky note is all you need. Keep your jobs moving faster and on budget at Lowe's. Valid through 7/8 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
Our next community suggestion or recommendation, Allison Sheridan recommended this next story to me tonight as I was cooking dinner right before I recorded the show. She's like, have you seen this? And I had not. So if you haven't already, go subscribe to Allison's podcast, No Silicast. It's fantastic. And there's chit chat across the pond. Just go to start with the Everything Good Begins with podfeed.com. So go check out what Allison is doing there. Now, in terms of the article she recommended, it's about a Fiat. And, I've kind of made my frustrations known with what Stellantis is doing with their auto brands here in the U.S. They do, when it comes to the Fiat brand, they do sell the Fiat 500 and the 500e, which is the electric version of the 500 here in the U.S. It is pretty affordable. It's got, not a ton of range, but it's pretty affordable. And I see a couple of them around here and there. There's another Fiat model headed to the U.S., and this is the Fiat Topolino. And it looks very much like a Fiat. And I've seen some paint combinations that make it look very Italian and cool. When I say very Italian, I mean there was one where they had, I don't think it was the Italian flag colors, but it was just very much, it looked very European and very, very cool. I don't know how else to explain it. But this car starts at under $14,000 US. And you might be thinking to yourself, oh, that's really cheap. What's the catch? This car is certainly going to come with some compromises. And you are correct. So Topolino, which I'm butchering because the Italian language is so beautiful. I do not have the chops to make that sound cool. But the Topolino is Italian for little mouse. So this is a small car, as you can imagine, for $14,000. It is a 2-seater. You do, this is so funny, it was listed in the article. You do get a horn, you get seat belts, and you get a windshield, which is, those were the features listed in the article that I read. It comes with a 5.4 kilowatt hour battery. You heard that correct, not 54, 5.4 kilowatt hour battery, 46 miles of range. The top speed is 19 miles an hour. It's not technically street legal in the US unless you pay for a street legal upgrade that will max the top speed out at 25 miles per hour, but will certainly reduce that range to something lower than 46 miles. And technically, this is a golf cart. Again, if you pay for that, and I can't imagine the upgrade's all that expensive, but if you pay for that upgrade, you could drive it on some city streets. But this is really golf cart. It's classified as a golf cart, or it's in the same classification as a golf cart. This would be really good for folks who live in a beach community or people who live in communities like Sun City here in Arizona, where the residents drive golf carts from place to place to place. I could also imagine like if you have a large campus, like a large church or a university or college, or even a large campus like Google or TSMC, which is building a factory in Arizona, those kind of places, this might be a really good option for people to get from one place to another on campus where they don't have to go on actual roads. But yeah, I really hope to see one of these. I don't know that they will be showing them off at CES, but if they are, I'll let you know. Super cool looking cars. All right, our final submission comes from Mark K in the UK. I typically will just say somebody's first name because I don't know if people want me giving out their last names and things like that, but it was pointed out to me, and rightfully so, that Mark is a pretty common name. So if I'm saying Mark in the UK, there could be several Marks in the UK that they give me this information. So and as a matter of fact, it came from a Mark in the UK that it's like, did I give you this story or not? And I was like, that makes sense. So Mark K in the UK will be how we refer to this Mark. So Mark K in the UK, he sent along a few articles for us today. Starting off in June, battery electric vehicle registrations in the UK were up nearly 30% overall when you compare it to the new car market, right? There were 64,440 battery electric vehicle registrations in June, and Tesla was actually 12,403 of those battery electric registrations. So out of 6,440, 12,403 of those were Teslas, if I wasn't clear. Tesla's seen a little bit of a rebound in sales across the UK and Europe. So if we look at June 2025 versus June 2026, they're up 42%. So great news for battery electric vehicle registrations in Europe. Mark's take on this is, I think, pretty accurate. He says, I think when countries reach 30% new registrations, it's a pivot point for greater adoption. And I would tend to agree with that. And the UK has some pretty decent federal incentives or governmental incentives for buying EVs right now. So we'll see, what happens as they are, those incentives get phased out, and maybe even new incentives get put in. Who knows? But I do think this is interesting. I do agree. 30% does seem like a pivot point. Okay, this is our final story. And this is partly Mark, partly me. So I'll tell you which part is which. The first part is Mark. So researchers at the University of Cambridge found that putting physical pressure on lithium-ion battery packs, that could double their lifespan or its lifespan. So when lithium-ion batteries are charged or discharged, they expand and contract. One of the Cambridge folks in the article compared it to breathing, which, that makes sense. And the repeated stress of this expanding and contracting can contribute to cell degradation for a variety of different reasons. So researchers built a device that applied a steady pressure to pouch cells. Now, they didn't do prismatic cells or cylinder cells. They were using pouch cells in this study, or in this, I guess it was a study. And in order to maintain steady pressure, they adjusted the pressure to stay at 181 psi or 12.5 bars to make sure that the cell received that pressure constantly. So like I said, if you think about the cell charging or discharging as like breathing, inhaling and exhaling, as the cell would charge up, obviously the cell would swell a little bit, so maybe they needed to ease up on the pressure a little bit. But as the cell was being discharged, they would need to increase pressure to keep it at 181 psi. So hopefully that makes sense. This method causes issues if there's too much or too little pressure. So there's a real Goldilocks sweet spot in order to make this work. So if there's too little pressure, it actually accelerated cathode cracking. But if there's too much pressure, it was more likely for lithium plating to occur on the anode. So the pressure really has, like I said, to be in that sweet spot. Now, this is kind of where the Mark recommendation and me digging into this a little bit more starts to shift. And I didn't know what lithium plating was before reading that term in the article, so I dug into it a little bit. And what happens is the lithium ions will start to accumulate at the surface of the anode, and those little metallic deposits can grow and start to restrict the flow of ions. And at its worst, this can turn into a safety issue and cause some sort of catastrophic failure. At its best, it's going to affect your performance, and it's not going to affect it in a good way. It's going to be a negative effect on your performance. And by the way, it sounds like most of this is due or occurs during DC fast charging. So keep that in mind, because the University of Purdue researchers partnered with Texas Instruments, and they're actually working on tools and algorithms to detect and mitigate lithium plating. So the team invented their own algorithm or metrics for quantifying lithium plating. And what they're measuring is voltage, time, and temperature. And from that, they're able to, those are their observations. And from those observations, they're able to find or determine like a plating period, plating power, and plating energy. And all of this, a lot of this, we don't need to get into a lot of detail, but they plot all of this on a graph, and they will determine the right conditions for plating to occur. And this, there's like this sweet spot they call the Bermuda Triangle where lithium plating can occur. And they just basically, through the algorithm, they can track this. And a lot of this can be mitigated through smarter EV chargers. Like I said, a lot of this happens when we're doing DC fast charging, although when you're charging too slow, this can happen as well. But our traditional charging infrastructure relies on like a constant current or constant voltage. And this delivers, this is good in terms of, we're able to deliver this to as many cars as will let us at this constant current. And, it's not very smart. It's just delivering electrons through the charger. So what researchers are proposing is using their smart charging algorithm that they developed that will monitor the battery temperature, the voltage, and they'll throttle the current accordingly. And by doing this, not only will they reduce the risk of lithium plating, but according to researchers, these algorithms will also allow you to charge twice as many times before you start seeing battery degradation. So, this is all done in the lab. We'll have to kind of see how this is adopted by the auto industry as a whole. But I think this is really cool for a couple of reasons. One, is they're improving battery technology without changing any battery chemistry. They're not adding dopants or any of these other additives to the chemistry to make these things last longer or make them more durable. They're using, basically math to correct this problem, math and physics. Like the University of Cambridge, you would obviously have to build the car to be able to keep constant pressure on a battery pack. That would not be something that you could issue over a software update. However, if these algorithms work to reduce the lithium plating, there could be an update to a charger in a car so that they can talk and they can stay out of that Bermuda Triangle or that danger zone that would encourage lithium plating. So I don't know. There are lots of cool things coming down in terms of cool ways that people are solving problems without necessarily needing to make big, huge, swinging battery chemistry changes or form factor changes or anything like that. It's just like, this is simple math. So I think it's super cool. Hopefully you think it's super cool. And that's all I got for you today. Managed to speak for 45-ish minutes, depending on if you got ads or not. So, hopefully you enjoyed this episode. If you want to email me, it's Bodie, BODIE, at 918digital.com. You can also find me on X at 918digital, although I don't know, I say it out of habit. I don't really go on X all that often. I am on LinkedIn quite a bit, so you can search for me. It's Bodie, BODIE, Grimm, GRIMM on LinkedIn. And I go subscribe to Live With It. I'll put links in the show notes. Go subscribe to Live With It. Go check out Allison's website. Everything good starts with podfeet.com, which is just podfeet.com. And go subscribe to the Car Stuff podcast. I think I hit everything. Still, even though I missed a show last week, still working on this nearly every single day, and got some cool things. We'll just say cool opportunities for the future. How about that? All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you all